Hey guys. So mastering is often referred to as the black art, and it's because it's very, very confusing for people that don't do it. It's so misunderstood. So many times I get questions in terms of how far is too far, or how far is not far enough, and is this fully realized as best as it can be? And these are the types of questions that were going through my head when I started out doing this as a teenager. I just wanted to know the answers to all these questions. I wanted to know the secrets that these mastering engineers knew. I wanted to have that type of understanding internally so I could go and do the best job I could do. So when I started out, I had this understanding that mastering was a process where you build on processes to amount to something and build to something until you just don't want to touch it anymore. And for many people, it might be the case, but it's not for me. And it never has been for me. It's not the way I was trained, and it's not the way I was brought up in this process. It was a much different mindset. It had to do with many processes interrelating and building on one another as kind of a starting place and then work up against that. It's just the way we are able to achieve our results. We can also do it other ways, but a lot of the times this is where we end up going. So what I'm going to do today is explain the mastering process in reverse. I'm going to get as far as I can with limited tools, with very few tools, and then build on the tools from there, but starting backwards, using the end first and then working in reverse. This is not the way I work, but it's going to be really valuable to show how all these processes interrelate, and hopefully we'll be able to draw some really great information from this. So, what are the things that are the same for everybody? Everybody's working with Digital Zero. It doesn't matter if you're working in a mastering house that's a commercial mastering house or a home studio, maybe you're working in Pro Tools in your bedroom. Digital Zero is Digital Zero, and everybody's working up within that confine. If you go past Digital Zero, you're going to get into clipping, and that's going to be distortion, not the distortion that you're usually going for musical purposes. It's the kind of distortion that you're hoping to avoid. So mastering engineers, to avoid that, they use limiters, generally speaking, and they have an output of the limiter just below that ceiling, so no matter how much level you push up into that limiter, you'll never get into clipping, you'll never get into distortion. So what I'm going to do today is master this song by a band called Astton. It's a song called Killed a Doe, mixed by J.P. Barriondo, and I'm going to master it with limited tools, only using a limiter first, and then I'm going to build backwards from there, showing how all these processes interrelate, and we're going to be able to A-B along the way. So, it's not that I'm mastering with just a limiter. I'm going to get as far as I can with just that limiter. So in this case, I'm going to use the Waves L2 because it might be one of the most well-known limiters, and I actually love using the Waves L2 because it has a certain character that actually envelops the signal. It's not the most transparent limiter, but I like it for that reason. It hugs bottom, it hugs some low mid, it allows me to work up into it with EQ, and it has a nice character that I often enjoy. Sometimes I go to more transparent limiters. There's many limiters that we have at our disposal. We basically have everything under the sun. And as mastering engineers, we pick and choose for whatever comes our way. But for simple purposes these days, I'm going to use the L2 because everybody knows it. I'm going to be using it to get 2 dB of level through this threshold. So the threshold is going to be at minus 2 dB, and the output ceiling is going to be at minus a tenth. Beyond that, we are going to work analog today. So understand that we are playing back a digital file and converting that signal from digital to analog using a D to A converter. And then from there, we're going to either do some processing or not and convert from analog back to digital using an A to D converter. And part of that is going to be understanding how to hit that A to D converter in the most optimum way. And that can get into clipping as part of a musical shaping process and working that up into the limiter. So the first process I'm going to do, or the first example I'm going to present, is just going to be hitting that A to D into the limiter at 2 dB, and we're going to see how far we can get with that limited amount of tools. So I'm just going to focus on the end of the song here, and let's see what we can do. Okay, so if you can look here for a second, I'm just clipping the A to D just a little bit. You see those red lights light up a little bit. I'm not looking at the A to D in terms of how far I should push something, but it is giving me some reassurance of where I am in my peripheral vision, if you will. Just showing me how far I want to push into that A to D, knowing that it's going into that brick wall limiter that's giving me 2 dB after that. And beyond that, I'm just pushing or pulling back level to fine tune where I am. And this is a good place. I don't want to push it anymore because I feel like it's going to start sounding hard and kind of, just forced. And I don't want to pull it back because I like how far I'm pushing it. It's got a little bit of excitement. It's nowhere near done, but this is as far as I'm able to get with this limited amount of tools. I'm not able to use any EQ yet. I'm not able to use any compression, just going to the A to D and the limiter. So we've got that printed. And now what I want to do is I want to introduce a compressor. I'm going to introduce a Allen Smart C1. You guys can do this at home too. And use something very similar. So before I introduce the analog version, I'm going to use an SSL G-Series bus compressor, which is something that you can find in the UA suite. And it's a really good digital representation of sort of what this analog piece of gear does. So let me pull it up here. Okay, so we have this up. I'm going to put the attack at 30 milliseconds, put the release at 0.1. And that's just a really great setting because it allows me to just get a little bit of hug and tightness that I like. And I'm going to lower the makeup gain a little bit, and I'm going to raise the threshold a little bit just so we can hear what this compressor is doing. Cool, just to give you guys an idea of what that is, but now I'm going to do it analog. So I'm going to bypass this, and I'm going to patch in the Allen Smart C1, which is very similar to what this plugin does. Okay, so now I've got the C1 patched in, and what I'm going to do is work up into this enveloping process. It's going to allow me to push more signal in because what a compressor does is it pulls down the peak information so that then, while the peak information is pulled down, you have some headroom, now that you have the headroom, to raise it all up. So the average level gets raised up, and you have something a little bit more dense. Now, in theory, this works great. Musically is what you need to key in on. So, how far to push it? Well, what I want to have happen is I want it to feel like I just want to dig into it musically. I want to push it up just the right way so it just starts feeling like it's just moving with the compression. The drums are moving in with the compression in a musical way that just breathes a little bit and also tightens everything at the same time. So I'm kind of squeezing, but then working up against that in opposition to create a little bit more life. I'm going to A-B this now against what I had before without the compression so you can hear what this compression is doing. Again, realize that it is allowing me to push in a little bit more level. Not that I'm trying to achieve level, but this is part of the musical balance process. It's allowing me to work up against it musically. All right, so here we go. We're going to A-B against the new versus the old. Cool, so you can see how everything's starting to kind of bloom outward and getting a little more punch and excitement and life. It's doing exactly what I was intending it for it to do, so we're good, but we're not done. So when I'm introducing this compression and going into the A to D clipping, it's allowing me to clip it a little harder even, and it's going into that L2, which I have not adjusted yet. I'm working up all of these processes in combination to get closer to where I want to end up. But because all of these processes have a shape and a sound to them, I want to make sure that we end up in a nice place overall balance-wise, and that's why I want to get into EQing into all of this. All right, so next what I'm going to do is patch in this EAR tube EQ. It's a 5-band EQ. It's one of our favorite pieces of gear here at our studio, and I'm going to shape into that dynamic process that comes post, and we're going to see if we can even get happier. All right, so now I've just introduced the EQ, and I'm EQing into the compression, converter, and limiting all together. And so much of the time, I have to just feel into it. It's not something that I really know that I'm going to do right off the bat because I kind of have an idea of where I want to take it, but so much of my decision-making is just in doing the process and seeing what I feel like as I introduce it because it's informing my decisions in real time as it's happening. And what I found is by doing this, I want to emphasize a little bit more around 120 to create some support, to kind of take away any kind of edge that might be there up above on the upper mids of the guitars, make sure that it has some nice support. But I also want to, as I'm adding that, have it nice and open at the same time. So one way I can do that is by de-emphasizing a little bit of 60 and emphasizing more around 120. These are wide band EQs. It's going to kind of give it some nice support, but it's also going to tilt everything a little bit open so that I can then open up around 3K and 6K and have it expand in all directions. Let's experience that. I'm going to play it down and A/B against the second print that I did that has the compression and clipper, A to D, and the limiting. Here we go. So what I'm really trying to illustrate is how we're working up against the digital ceiling and how we're implementing all of these processes to work and build on one another so they all interrelate in a musical way. So if you have any questions about this, happy to discuss further.